Ready.
Está iniciando aqui no YouTube e em breve eu começo aqui, só um segundo.
E vai aparecer para mim como? Para eu saber que está bem?
Eu vou te avisar, mas ele vai aparecer uma vez na tela.
Ah,
E vamos...
Hello.
Gente, desculpa, eu caí. Só um segundo. Problemas técnicos.
acontece.
Vou entrar ao vivo, beleza? Em 5, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Boa noite a todas as pessoas que nos acompanham aqui pelo YouTube, pelas redes da Intrínseca, da editora Intrínseca. Eu fui convidada pela editora para fazer essa conversa com a autora do livro Contra o Feminismo Branco, Rafia Zaccaria, esse livro aqui, que já está disponível em todas as lojas, inclusive em e-book. No final da live, nós vamos deixar no Instagram da Intrínseca o link de compra para quem quiser. E para vocês que vão acompanhar aqui a nossa conversa hoje, se vocês quiserem ouvir a Rafia Zaccaria, autora em inglês, né, deixar aqui no botãozinho de interpretação, ou se vocês quiserem a tradução para o português, mudar para português, nesse botãozinho aqui embaixo, que parece um globo, mudar para colocar em português, que a intérprete Stephanie vai fazer a tradução para o português. Vou apresentar aqui a autora para vocês, para quem ainda não conhece. Rafia Zaccaria é escritora, advogada e ativista dos direitos humanos, que trabalhou pelas vítimas de violência doméstica em várias partes do mundo. A autora nasceu e cresceu na cidade paquistanesa de Karachi, e hoje vive entre o Paquistão e os Estados Unidos, onde trabalhou no Conselho de Administração da Anistia Internacional. Rafia Zaccaria também é uma grande referência para nós, feministas negras no Brasil, que estudamos empoderamento. Ela é referência bibliográfica do livro Empoderamento, que é o terceiro da coleção Feminismos Plurais, e que a gente já vem acompanhando. E vou falar um pouquinho sobre o livro, a sinopse do livro Contra o Feminismo Branco. Nesse livro, Zaccaria expõe um ponto de vista que representa as diferentes etnias, religiões e culturas que acabam excluídas pela branquitude no feminismo. No livro, ela reconstrói a história do movimento e assim nos mostra como a falta de diversidade entre os grandes nomes do feminismo hegemônico contribuiu para que ele invisibilizasse as realidades de mulheres não brancas. De novo, o livro aqui, assim que acabar, né, vai só correr lá no Instagram da Intrínseca, que o link para compra vai estar lá, e que vai ter 10% de desconto também na Amazon para quem comprar até o dia 6/2 com o cupom FEMINISMO. Rafia Zaccaria, é um grande prazer conversar com você hoje. Boa noite, seja bem-vinda nessa conversa.
Hello, it's great to be speaking with you as well. As I mentioned, I read your work, and it's exciting to talk to another feminist of color who knows about these issues and has undoubtedly faced them in your own work and your life. So I'm very delighted to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
Prazer todo meu, Rafa. A primeira pergunta O objetivo do livro, né? Muitas vezes, por conta do título, eu acredito que você tenha recebido muitas respostas, às vezes, de feministas brancas, que não entenderam o título ou consideraram ele polêmico. Você podia falar um pouco dessa diferença, né, entre cor da pele e a branquitude mesmo, como um sistema, né, a branquitude como poder?
Yes, absolutely. So this answer is in two parts. The first, of course, is that, as I say on the first page of the book, when I am talking about a white feminist or whiteness, rather, I'm talking about not just not the racial color white, but whiteness as a force of oppression. So I'm talking about white supremacy and white privilege. And I'm talking about the women who are mostly white, but can be of other races as well, who are unwilling to examine the role white privilege has played in developing the story of global feminism as we understand it today. So I'm interested in how, for instance, you know, the beliefs, the agendas, the priorities of white women, you know, who upper middle class white women living in the West are essentially replicated as, you know, as the agendas, priorities, policies of all women. So that is the project of the book. The second part of the answer is that I wanted to have white in the title of the book. And the reason for that is that for years and years and years, and even to some extent now, I was chastised for using the word white to describe someone. So if I said that is a white woman, or this is white culture, that was considered incredibly objectionable. And the same is not obviously considered objectionable when it's like you're talking about Black culture or Asian culture or brown culture or any of the others. That was used all the time, no problem, without brown and Black people having any say in whether it should or shouldn't be used. And the reason why it was objectified is connected to the first answer of the question, is that, you know, essentially people think that whiteness stands for everything. It's the neutral, the objective, you know, that it doesn't have a cultural reality of its own.
Perfeito, é a mesma coisa no Brasil também, né? Essa mesma questão. E seguindo nessa crítica, tem também a questão do imperialismo norte-americano, né? Das agências, muitas vezes, pensar em soluções para o que eles chamam de resto do mundo. Queria que você falasse também um pouquinho sobre isso, né? Também no debate que você traz sobre empoderamento também, como eles acham que ações de empoderamento é chegar em determinados países e determinar o que aquelas mulheres devem fazer ou não. Você podia falar um pouco sobre essa questão?
Yes. You know, and in this case, I sometimes group the Britain as the old colonial power, the United States as the new colonial power. And the problem that emerged or has emerged is that, and the problem that animated my own work was that, you know, I was writing this book during the Black Lives Matter protests, you know, to do with the murder of George Floyd. And I had been studying the Black Lives Matter movement before that as well. And what I wanted to show for, you know, perhaps the domestic audience of Black people and people of color in America, North America, in the United States, was how the ways of oppression and the technology of dehumanization that the US state uses on Black and brown people in America. So, police killings, neighborhoods that don't have basic services, high rates of poverty, mass incarceration, all of these problems that are used to oppress Black and brown and Asian people in the United States were then being taken and replicated abroad in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and in all the other countries where international development claims to be there for making the place better. And I wanted to show how the dehumanization of, say, Breonna Taylor, right, who was killed while she was sleeping in her bed in Kentucky, is not different from the dehumanization faced by the Afghan woman who was dragged out along with her family by US soldiers in the night raid, or the Afghan grandmother who is killed from a drone attack because of US bomb dropped on her. I wanted to connect to show that these oppressions are the same, and they are upheld by white supremacy. White supremacy that is not being questioned, and particularly not being questioned, for instance, in the development aid sector, where people, mostly post-colonial nations, are living in so much poverty and so much want that, they're so grateful to get anything. And because of that, they are dehumanized. So Bill Gates thinks, let me give a chicken to every woman, and then she will have a chicken, and I will cure poverty, and I will create women's empowerment, because she'll have a chicken, and the chicken will lay eggs, and then the eggs will have more chickens. And, nobody, the billions of dollars were spent on this idea. It's a real idea. And nobody ever said to him, could you solve the problem of your wife's white friends by giving them a chicken? Can you do that? No, of course not. Because a white, upper middle class, wealthy woman is understood to be a complicated human being with complex desires, complex ideas, complex problems. But a Black woman, in Africa especially, but also in India, brown women, and in other parts of the world, are imagined as like these infantilized, childish beings that, oh, you give them a chicken and their problems are solved.
Perfeito. Então, nesse sentido, você acredita que para pensar o feminismo é necessário pensar para uma perspectiva também anticolonial e interseccional?
Yes, that is what I think, anti-colonial and intersectional. But I will caution that the term intersectional has, become, like I talk about how empowerment became from a buzzword to a fuzzword, where it just means whatever you want it to mean. I think that the term intersectionalism, which stands for understanding the whole woman. So, in case I'm a brown Muslim Pakistani woman, so Pakistani American woman. So all of those factors, all of those things are part of my identity, and my marginalization, it evolves from, my marginalization can be pinned to all of those. I'm brown, I'm Muslim in a world that, by and large hates Muslims and thinks all Muslims are terrorists. So all of those things. So that is what intersectionality, as understood by Kimberly Crenshaw, professor of law at Columbia, that's the meaning of it. But in common feminist discourse, it has become sort of diluted and become like a woke, a woke term that a lot of white women are throwing around and attaching to all sorts of endeavors that have nothing to do with, empowering women of color or Black, brown, Asian, etc. women. And so I've become, I asked at least women of color to be, to think about this word and be more skeptical of how it's being used and in what context it's being used, because they're selling everything from candles to sports bras and in that whole capitalist mechanism, and saying, well, this supports intersectional feminism, and that has nothing to do with intersectional feminism. But I believe that yes, that the whole woman needs to be understood, and all the different ways in which she's marginalized need to be taken into account.
Nesse sentido, como você falou da palavra empoderamento, né, ela foi muito ligada, esvaziada, para uma perspectiva individual, né, individualista, uma perspectiva que retira o fortalecimento mesmo, que seria o fortalecimento social das mulheres para o enfrentamento dessas opressões. Como resgatar esse significado mesmo do que seria empoderamento, para além dessa visão que se tornou esvaziada pelo capitalismo?
I think that there are two answers to your question. No, the first one is like a specific answer, and then there's also a more general answer. I think in terms of a specific answer, I try to show toward the end of my book how the focus on hyper-individualism, or what I call the lean-in, Sheryl Sandberg, girl boss feminism, where the idea is that, I'm just going to be the female version of what the white man is. And it is a version that is very, very, I would even go as far as to say that it has killed the global feminist movement, right? Because what it has done is that it has defined feminist success as, getting ahead as fast as you can, at any cost, beating all the other women, just like, she says, leaning in and acting like men. And that is the dominant, I would say, form of feminism that's prevalent in the white and Western world. It's not even questioned. And the damage of that comes both to feminism, global feminism, right? Because if you lose an idea, if you lose the concept that you can be successful, and work together and be successful, rather than only be successful by competition and beating everybody out. If you don't even have that idea of success, I will tell you that there are a lot of white women feminists in the US and in the UK too, I'm sure, who who will call themselves feminists. But if you tell them that feminism means that, say, at the workplace, they create mutual aid networks, instead of just thinking, how can I shoot her down? How can I get past her? How can I get my boss's job? They don't know. That is complete anathema to them. And and if my book hadn't been named Against White Feminism, I would even say they wouldn't even pick up this book. If I had said For Sisterhood, if the book was called, which I would have loved to have named it that, they wouldn't have picked it up, because these conversations about sisterhood tend to take place among feminists of color, because they constantly have to deal with a world that is not created for them, that constantly devalues them. And, I had to tell white women that the, discomfort that they might feel on reading my book is the discomfort that women of color feel 100% of the time, 24/7, in every situation. They are constantly having to defend themselves and their worth. So I think that a lot of work needs to be done. But what I try to say to white women is that, they also have lost out because of this individual model, because I would say that Black and brown feminists have more of they have more experience of sisterhood amongst, other brown and Black feminists than white women do. I think white women are exceptionally lonely in their pursuit of success or fulfillment. And in that sense, I think that this model, they need to recognize how this model, it's not just an issue that, of course, it hurts women of color, but it also hurts them. It also keeps them back. It also keeps them unfulfilled.
Perfeito. No livro também, Zaccara, você faz críticas, né, às sufragistas, a feministas, como Simone de Beauvoir, por exemplo, que universaliza a categoria mulher, e a outras feministas. Mostrando como também o racismo, né, de muitas sufragistas, de muitas dessas feministas. Como é que, para você, a gente tem esse limite, né, obviamente, de fazer essa crítica, o que é necessário de ser feito, mas você acha que é possível ainda lermos esses trabalhos? Você acha que ainda é possível considerar esses trabalhos dessas feministas? Como é que você vê isso? Que é uma pergunta muito recorrente aqui no Brasil.
Uh, you know, uh, the reason I had to point out the issue with the fact that the story of feminism is told beginning with suffrage in the UK or the US. The reason why I had to point out the problem with that is that it shows from the very beginning the privileging of a colonizing society over a colonized society. Because if you are in a colonized society, like, like South America, Brazil, Pakistan, Pakistan, India at the time, you did not have a representative government. So what rights can you ask from a government that doesn't recognize your humanity and doesn't recognize you as a full citizen? You can't. I mean, you can't ask for anything from that government, right? The only time you can ask is if you are a colonizing society like the UK and the US, because then you can say, this is a government made up of people just like me, and they're going, and I want, other than our gender, everything is the same. And so I'm going to ask, I can ask them. So, so in the book, I have example of, these white women going to Indian women and saying, well, you should ask for suffrage too, we'll teach you. And the Indian women are like, we don't want to be equal to brown men, because brown men are also enslaved by you, the British. And, when we are free, when you are gone, we want freedom from you. So when you are gone, yes, we want suffrage from the first day of independence. And I just love that example because it shows, what I'm talking about in relation to suffrage. As for the question of how do you read a history of racism and white supremacy How do you read about feminists who are white supremacists, like Susan B. Anthony, who is still on the American silver dollar, and she's the one who said famously, I'd rather cut off my arm than vote for a Negro to have the vote, than say that a Black man could have the vote before a white woman. So, but I think that decision lies with the people who are most affected by that narrative. And in this Susan B. Anthony's case, that would be young Black women and girls who, who will read that and, will end up saying, wow, I mean, it's okay to say that I will cut off my arm, but I'll never give the vote to, Black people, essentially. It's okay to say that because she's still on the dollar and she's still in my history book. So I think that the rule of thumb has to be that the people who are most disempowered, the people who are most affected by these racist histories are the ones who get to decide whether these women and these other figures get to be retained in history or not. History is written for the present. It's not written for the past, and it is written for the future. So those questions have to be considered because and they have to be considered by the people that were left out. And, in that particular case, that's Black, Brown, Asian people who were excluded from the discourse. It wasn't just that there were white feminists. It was just that the Brown and Black and Asian feminists were never counted. So, so if a white person is present in history, it's not because all the others were not present. It's because their existence was, in that time, it was decided that their existence was worthless.
Perfeito. Você traz também uma crítica, né, essa ideia do branco salvador, né, e da feminista de cor ingrata, que é algo que ainda permeia essas relações. Você podia falar um pouco sobre isso?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. You can go and listen to, or maybe don't listen because it's horrendous, but you can go listen to the last week of BBC Women's Hour, which is, the most prominent, most listened to program, women's program by, you can listen it in podcast, but it's among British women, it is number one, okay? And I just looked a few days ago, and the last 5 or 6 episodes include episodes which, in some way or the other, show brown women, Muslim women, Black refugee women, somehow helpless, unable to change their culture, unable to having a bad culture, having a bad religion, and then white women coming in to save, them somehow. This woman, Emma Barnett, who's the host, pretends to be, she's like the white woman, like, oh, I'm so sorry, and she's listening to these stories of trauma, and she's like, I'm so sorry. And that is the dynamic I'm talking about, right? Where you have this white woman, Emma Barnett, who helps make the narrative for much of the country on a daily basis, right? And she is intentionally only choosing to tell the stories in which white women look good. And the way she is making white women look good is to make brown and Black women look bad. That is a persistent. So, and the reason why I'm saying about this program is because then people say, oh, well, that was in history. Oh, well, Afghanistan war is over, or things like. The reason I'm directing you to that is because that is now, that's this week, and I looked at it and I look at it and I think I can't possibly go into every every single program and point out all the ways in which this is a mischaracterization, and the whole import of the program is to say British culture is good, imperialism brought civilization to everybody, and British women are so awesome. They're out there saving all these women in all these places and doing the good thing, to the extent that even when she has a white woman on the show, she had a white woman on the show who adopted 2 Black kids and then didn't want them and wanted to return them. Okay. And even that is presented an insane concept, so horrific that a human being would think that about children. Even that is presented sympathetically when it comes to white women. It's all about her the complex feelings, and it's about her how hard she tried, and how nobody's saying you're racist, which is the truth. Okay, you're racist, so now you're giving these kids away. And if a Black woman had done that, it would have been top news everywhere, that look at these Black women, look at these Pakistani women, look at these, they can't even raise their kids. And you see that all everywhere, where it's to the point, when Angelina Jolie goes to and brings back a child from Vietnam, and brings back a child from Haiti, and brings back, it's what that is saying is that not only are these women, brown and Black and Asian women, so unable to bring any kind of empowerment to themselves, but they are also inadequate, horrible mothers. And the white woman is the best mother, and she's going to come and she's going to rescue all these kids, and then she's going to take them, and then she's going to show you what a good mother is. So, and I present this example because everywhere you look, everywhere you dig, even a little bit, the white woman athlete, the white woman explorer, the white woman mother, the white woman aid worker, all of the white woman CEO, everywhere you look, they are presented as the role models for who, women should be. All women should follow their lead. And the fact is that the vast majority of the world's women are not white. They are brown women, they're Black women, they're Asian women. And if the global feminist agenda is not dictated by them, their feminism is already dead. I mean, white women might be saying whatever that they want to themselves, that, we're so great, we're so awesome. Emma Barnett on BBC Women's Hour thinks she's really, broken some glass ceilings. But the fact is that the vast majority of the world already will think feminism is irrelevant because it doesn't speak to them. Just one more thing. Just today, the Taliban in Afghanistan announced their big charter of women's rights. And of course, this is just a ridiculous document. Doesn't have the right to education, doesn't have the right to employment, which of course are 2 huge major things. They don't have the freedom to do either of them on this charter. This is a huge problem for global feminism, a huge problem. But because the US feminists who could have done so much on this issue, and global feminists who could have done so much on this issue, are so disunited, so unwilling to hear about or have a conversation about race, that the world is just going to watch. Nothing is going to happen. The Afghan women will have to deal with the worst situation in the world. And all of us feminists are going to be unable to help them. So the urgency is very, very great, and it's going to become greater as we progress into climate change, as we go into more and more migrant and refugee situations. But, if we don't have the conversation about race, we can't go forward.
Nesse sentido, você traz uma crítica, né, ao Sex and the City, né, dizendo que por trás da popularidade dessa série havia essa crença de que as feministas brancas foram que descobriram o prazer sexual, né, feminino, libertador, colocando as mulheres negras, as mulheres de cor, num lugar de mulheres oprimidas nesse lugar. No Brasil, as mulheres negras, todas as mulheres são objetificadas, obviamente, mas tem esse peso muito maior da objetificação em cima das mulheres negras e mulheres de cor. Então, mas mesmo assim, na hora da libertação, se coloca essa crítica que você fez em relação ao Sex and the City. Você podia falar sobre essa relação?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say at the outset, and it's sad that I have to say this, but because I must have to say that I don't have any problem with sexual liberation, sexual pleasure. I feel that it is, every woman should and have 100% control, rights over her body, what she wants, what she doesn't want. So what I am against is that, yes, not only, for instance, you give the Brazilian example, it's not just that they're objectified, their sexuality is criminalized. And it's the same way for Black women in the United States. And even it was the same way for brown women during British colonialism in India, where the British went there and they wanted, to be able to have power over everyone. So they declared that any woman that is in the public sphere, any brown woman, they're all prostitutes. And because they're all prostitutes, then the state has the right to go do forced genital examinations on them, right? Because the idea is that the brown women carry disease and the white people have no disease. So the thing is that, and this is a culture, where I was born, Sindh province, and the Indus Valley civilization, which predates the Greeks even. The famous figurine is of a mother goddess. And of a dancing girl who, so this idea of sexuality, that is like a culture that's like thousands and thousands of years old, before Sex and the City, before any of this. But when, when the story of that is told, of course, it's begun with white women. And when white women decided to do that, when white women came to India as part of British colonialism, they were like, oh my God, these women are wearing saris. They're showing their midriff. This is so bad. Cover them up, and now, of course, it is that, in that sense, that persists because the idea is still that brown and Black female sexuality is somehow dangerous. It's something we have to control. The state has to have control over it. So, Black girls in American high schools are punished for dress code violations at 5 to 10 times the rate of white girls. So, if a Black girl is wearing short shorts, she will be punished by the school. But if a white girl is wearing them, like free pass, no one's going to say anything. It's just, this is a study. It's not something I'm making up. So I think that has to be pointed out again and again and again. And because the way they do this is that, they produce this pop culture narrative of like Sex and the City, and then they use it to apply to every culture, but they choose only white women from those cultures, right? Or they don't choose Black and brown women unless it's like India or Nigeria or somewhere. But even if it's Black or brown women, those Black and brown women are acting white. They have to act white to be understood as sexually liberated. And that's the part that I'm against. It's not just sexual liberation, it's feminism in general. Being a feminist should not mean having to act white. And that is what it has become. So that when there is no separation between whiteness and feminism, then whole part of the world, it's understood that if I want to really be taken seriously as a feminist, then I have to act white. And that's when I'll be understood as liberated, as, ambitious, as capable and worthy. And I think that unless we separate the two, and this is all women, unless we make an effort to take whiteness and white supremacy out of feminism. And of course, if you take white supremacy out of feminism, other women are going to appear in history. They're going to appear they're going to appear as leaders. White women really think, at least in the US, that if they are not in leadership, it's all over. They imagine that if they are not in charge or in control, then feminism will die. And the irony is that feminism is dying because they are in control.
Rafa, eu vou fazer agora algumas perguntas que chegaram das pessoas que estão assistindo, nos acompanhando aqui. Vou ler aqui a pergunta do Alan. Ele pergunta o seguinte: existem várias vertentes e construções dentro do movimento feminista, e existe uma parcela considerável de mulheres brancas que não encararam bem as ideias que você expôs na obra. Você acredita que a chave para acabar com esse problema está na conscientização, ou é preciso se emancipar primeiro das políticas destrutivas do capitalismo? Pergunta do Alan.
Well, I definitely think that we need to emancipate ourselves from the destructive policies of capitalism. There's no doubt about that. And my book goes into detail about it. But I think, yes, there were a number of women, most of them in the UK, who had a very, very negative reaction to the book. And, what I say to them, well, first of all, they had a very negative reaction, I think, to the concept of the book. They didn't read the book because they didn't even read the first page, because the definition that they're using of white feminism is, I'm not saying all white women who are feminists are white feminists. I'm saying something very much deeper and more systemic than that. I'm saying that the system is flawed. White supremacy is entangled in the system, and therefore we have to break it down and build it up again, because we can't just add like some Black women here and a few brown women here and there, but keep the system, because the system has been built to privilege and to put, white women at the top. The whole system is created for that purpose. So if we, I don't think they had the patience. And then of course, there's an element of self-preservation. White women are used to thinking of themselves as victims. They are used to thinking of themselves as oppressed by white men. And they are oppressed by white men. I'm not taking that from them. But the thing is, they are also oppressors. They're oppressors of Black, women of color, for Black, brown, Asian, Hispanic, LGBTQI women. And they are, I think, they are not able to confront that. They don't have the strength to confront the fact that, yes, you have been oppressed, but you have also oppressed. That is a very difficult thing for anyone, I think. So it's not that I'm asking something easy of them, but it is true that the self-image of white women has been we are the good guys, you know, we are the ones who are breaking the barriers, and we are the ones who are moving women ahead. And, you know, and the fact is that they are able to do that because they have been privileged by white supremacy. They don't want to hear that their success is not entirely fair and is not entirely because of what they've done. It's also because of their skin color. And that is very difficult for them for, you know, feminists of older white feminists, is very difficult for them. And it's also very difficult, I think, for brown and black feminists who are so used to sort of living off the scraps and leftovers that white women toss to them. You know, they are used to that system. And so some brown women and black women have problem with the book too, because they want to tell me, don't say that the system is bad, just keep going. And, you know, this white woman will toss you some little bits and give you some small position, and you be satisfied with that. So I would say that those are the two major, you know, people who have had a lot of problems with the book.
Vou fazer outra pergunta, só um minutinho. Da Milene Vargas. Milena Vargas pergunta: eu queria que a Rafa Zacari falasse um pouco sobre como o Ocidente, em suas invasões colonizadoras ao Oriente, na verdade, prejudicou a situação das mulheres. Como as mulheres na Ásia exerciam seus feminismos e seus direitos, e como os colonizadores pioraram a situação dessas mulheres.
In the Middle East, how colonizers, yeah. You know, it's a very big question. I could write,
Yes.
there are whole books and books about it, but I'll give you an example, you know, that I think is a good one, that shows what happened, right? And this example is from when the French colonized Algeria, and they still continue to have a presence there. But when the French colonized Algeria, they, when you look at the initial pictures and photographs and taken by French soldiers who went to Algeria, the photographs are of women from very far away. Okay, like the women in the background, they're of women who are covered up like is their culture and tradition. And so that is, you know, that was the colonizers' attitude, right? Is that we are looking at them from afar. By the middle of the period of French colonization, you have a very famous French painter, Delacroix, who has pictures of women in the harem, you know, they say, in the harem. And now the picture is of woman, she's half clothed, and they are in the harem, right? So they are in the women's space now. So the French painter is in the women's space now. And then by the time it is a time for the French to withdraw from Algeria, you can just Google French soldier postcards from Algeria or French soldiers' photos from Algeria. By the end of this period, French soldiers were paying women to take their clothes off, and they were taking pictures of them because they now had so much power that they could just, you know, tell women what to do, be naked if they wanted to take these voyeuristic pictures of them. And the reason why I tell this story is because it illustrates that it's not a question of covering and not covering. It's not a question of you know, who's right or wrong. Even, I mean, to some extent it is a question, but it's also, it's a question of power. It's a question of who has the power to tell the other person what to do. And that's what colonization did to every place that was affected by it, is that it took power away from the whoever had it, and it invested it in white people. And you know, just today I was talking to some people in South Asia about you know, what happened to, for instance, the Islamic legal system when the British arrived, right? Because it was put to an end completely, right? So you have to, point being is that there were all these systems, there were all these forms of cultural interaction, there were all this learning, you know, all this epistemology that was present in these societies. But it was, you know, the British and the French, they only wrote down what they wanted, what they believed was important. And so enormous amounts of knowledge and ways of thinking and framing the world were lost, because that, for hundreds of years, the British were there, or the French were there, and they, you know, went from looking at them from afar to in their homes, to then telling them to take off their clothes. And that is what people have to understand, is that colonized people today have, even today, carry that existential wound. I, growing up in Pakistan, had no access to my material culture. I couldn't see what a Mughal king, what his crown looked like, okay? Because why? It's all in the British Museum. And that is this current condition of millions and millions of people in the world. And because it's their condition, there is going to be, you know, we do have to have change, because those people cannot just continue to pass on this pain from generation to generation to generation, just so white people can feel good about themselves, just so white women can say, oh, I'm so great, I'm the feminist, I'm going there feeding kids and you know, caring for babies. It's not the truth. It's just not the truth. And you know, and that, I mean, I have tried to present very, like, a very tiny bit of that, of the story that's not being told in the book. But of course, like, it's much bigger than me.
Bom, a gente tem tempo para mais uma pergunta, fazer aqui uma pergunta que chegou também do público, pergunta da Alessandra. Ela pergunta o seguinte: é fundamental considerarmos a interseccionalidade, afinal, muitos fatores nos atravessam, mas apenas uma nos une, o sexo. Dividir as nossas lutas não enfraquece o feminismo? Não deixa uma vertente concorrendo contra a outra, quando nós deveríamos nos unir contra o patriarcado / capitalismo? Pergunta da Alessandra.
I think the problem is that if we cannot have a conversation unless we account for who has power within discourse. My book deals very specifically with feminist discourse, and it talks very specifically about who is taking up all the space and doing all the talking in feminism. And until those power differences, I didn't create a world where different races have different power. That world exists. I mean, it's the reality. And so if you are not going to acknowledge that power difference within feminists, within our conversation, if we cannot do that, then we can't ask, there's no way we can fight patriarchy. There's no way we can fight capitalism. It's because we first have to acknowledge the power differences among us and the fact that the most powerful and white women have taken up the whole conversation and made everyone else invisible. And so that's what I would say, is that, it's very, I think feminists can have complex conversations. I think it's very simplistic to say, oh, let's be united. I mean, it just doesn't work. We're not united, and we are all going to have different identities, different things that we bring to the table. But if we can talk past those differences, and if we are not afraid that, oh my God, let's not talk about race. Oh my God, let's not talk about this, because that's not united. Then that unity is fake. It's a fake unity. It means nothing. And that's what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that as feminists, as women, we are smart enough and strong enough and complex enough to have conversations that are not just black and white, or just, conversations that are just, we have to be united. I mean, like, what does that even mean? And so that's my message. But before I stop speaking, I want to say hi to my friends Giuliano and Alba and their baby Lorenzo, who are all listening from in Rio today. And I wanted to make sure that I gave them a shout out, a hello from me.
Obrigada, Rafa. A gente precisa se encaminhar para o final, tá bom? É muito bom te ouvir e queria que você dissesse suas palavras finais, né? Agradeço a presença, acho que dialoga muito com o que feministas negras vêm falando historicamente no Brasil, né? E são colocadas como divisionistas, como que estão separando o movimento quando essa divisão já está dada. Tem muitos diálogos, muitas aproximações. Que você falasse, né, deixasse agora nas suas palavras finais, para as mulheres, né, de fato, para entender essa mensagem, né, que você está trazendo, que não é de novo, né, acho que sendo repetitiva, mas eu acho que às vezes fica muito num lugar da competição e da picuinha, e não, às vezes, do entendimento estrutural do debate, que você deixasse essa última mensagem, né, que na verdade você está falando contra uma supremacia, né, contra um sistema, e como que você espera que esse livro seja recebido aqui no Brasil, para as leitoras e leitores brasileiros?
Well, like I said, I think, the book, for Black and brown women, the book is something that will prevent them from being gaslighted, right? Because again and again, Black and brown women are said, oh, no, this is in your head. It's all in your head. It's all in your head. So I wanted a book that a Black and brown woman could read. And so she reads it and she says, this is not all in my head, because there's this woman who was born in Pakistan, who's living, in the US, who has the same experience I'm having. So for them, that's the message of the book. But more importantly, there is a very, just as important, a message for white women. And, there are a lot of white women who ask me, what can I do? What can I do? And what I would say to them is that the problem has been that white women have been speaking for Black and brown women. And instead of doing that, I need white women to speak to other white women. Because I cannot get into those conversations that white women have among each other. And only if there are white women who are willing to say to other white women, don't do this, don't do this. This is going to erase this Black woman's work. This is going to silence this brown woman. If white women are willing to say that to each other, and have those conversations with each other, then the problem they have with us will be solved, because we know what the problems are. We are facing them. We are victimized by them. But we cannot, we cannot, white women are the ones with power right now. And they have to use their power to tell other white women that, you know what, let's make this a truly equal conversation. Because if we model equality among women, then we can demand equality from men in a much better way. So.
Muito obrigada, Ráfia, pela conversa, trazer esse debate. Mais uma vez aqui o livro Contra o Feminismo Branco, na editora Intrínseca. Assim que terminar a live, vai ter um link para quem quiser comprar o livro com o cupom de desconto. Também o livro está com 10% de desconto na Amazon até o dia 6/12, então fica aqui. De que agradeço, Ráfia, pelo debate, agradeço a editora Intrínseca, a todas as pessoas que nos acompanharam. Uma boa noite, espero que a gente tenha outras oportunidades também de diálogo. Obrigada.
Thank you so much. It would be my honor.